Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are you today? This is your host, Brian Forbes, and this is The Black Factor. Let me start by welcoming all of you back. Thank you for tuning in. Y'all know I love you like I always do. Look at here, y'all. So tonight, I want to talk about, well, I'm going to talk about, uh, is it really? Thank you, producer lady. Um, we're going to talk about a story that I did last year. I'm going to rebroadcast. This will be a live show, yet not live, because I will not be on here making commentary. But last year we did a story about a place in Georgia, a place in a area called Forsyth County, Georgia, right outside the city limits of Atlanta. In this particular lake called Lake Lanier, it has a very, very spooky past, which I'm going to discuss at length in this video. Um, this weekend, there was a death on Lake Lanier for the Memorial Day holiday. It seems that every holiday, this lake claims one or two more people. Now, I have heard that there was more than one death this weekend. But I'm going to read you a quick story that I pulled from MSNBC News or NBC News. And it says, man drowns in Georgia's Lake Lanier over the holiday weekend. And the story reads by Doha Madani, a 20-year-old man drowned while swimming in Lake Lanier over the Memorial Day weekend. The Georgia Department of Natural Resources said that its game wardens responded to the scene to assist in locating the man using side-scan sonar. The body of the man, who was not identified, was then recovered by the county fire department. Lake Lanier, on the outskirts of Atlanta, was created by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the 1950s, in part for flood management. At its deepest, the lake roughly 160 feet deep, according to the Corps. The area is a popular tourist and recreational destination and has been the site of numerous drownings over the years. Now, last year, authorities found the body of a man that had washed ashore. WXIA reported at the time that the man seemed to have been in the water for a week. The lake has been the subject of rumor and speculation, with some believing that it was made by flooding a town and that it's haunted by the bodies that might be underneath. Now listen to what they said in this article. It said it is subject to rumor and speculation. See, this is how they keep the people from knowing the truth. Rumor and speculation. In this rerun show, this rebroadcast that I'm about to give you, I'm going to tell you the facts. I'm going to give you the truth. I'm going to show you that it is not rumor and it is not speculation. They say that it was supposedly a flooding of a man-made, was made by flooding a town, and it's haunted by the bodies that might be underneath. Atlanta, the popular FX series created by Donald Glover, referenced the urban legend. You see that? Urban legend. Using fictionalized lake in its season 3 premiere in March. Urban legend, rumor, speculation. This is why they don't want to teach or have such a problem with critical race theory. Because if they were to even embark upon teaching it, which they don't anyway, that is a buzzword for conservatives to lose their minds for something that doesn't even exist in the school systems as it stands. Yet it still points out the fact that they refuse to acknowledge the truth and their history. It is not a rumor. It is not speculation. It is not fictionalized. And it is true. The Corps has denied the story, even posting a response to its frequently asked questions page. A. No. When land for constructing the lake. This was their answer. When the land for constructing the lake was acquired in the early 1950s, the area was mostly farmland. But they don't tell you whose farmland. That's what the website said. The government purchased the land from about 700 families over a 56,000 acre area. The majority of the buildings that were removed or demolished were farmhouses and outbuildings such as barns. That is also inaccurate. And in fact, what lies beneath Lake Lanier is a little town called Oscarville, which was a black town, which was the scene of people being run out of that town in the 1920s, based upon a lie, the typical lie of rape of a white woman. If you go to Forsyth County, which is in fact the richest county in Georgia and the whitest, there are cemeteries riddled throughout the area that is above ground, up and coming in that area. You can actually see tombstones in many of these mansions' backyards. And the dates all stop at around 1921. Why? Because that is when they ran all the black people out of those areas, and those are black cemeteries. But they're not going to tell you that part in these news articles, but I'm going to tell you about it on today's show. So, with that said, I want you all to enjoy this presentation that I'm about to provide for a rebroadcast of the Lake Lanier story. And here we go, y'all. Just hang in there. So, let me get into this other thing, which carries directly over into that. I want to know why the injustices in America that take place, that are levied by our Caucasian brethren, never discussed or talked about in the history books that our students learn from every single day. You know, it makes you wonder, because there's so much hidden history in this country. There's so many things that have taken place throughout the history of the United States that don't get discussed. Now, they're either not discussed because black folks have done something positive, beneficial, which the list is extensive. It's you can't even talk about it. It's so long. Or it's because they don't want to talk about their own atrocities, right? But part of the reason they don't want to talk about it is because, just like the old quote goes, to the winner go the spoils. And that means that when they win the war, or when they decide to tell the story, win, lose, or draw, if they're the ones in power, they get to tell the story their own way. Until the lion can write his story down to be preserved in history, the hunter will always be the one telling the story. And to the victor go the spoils. And there are far too many occasions where black people and black history and black accomplishments and black contributions have been erased from our history, and from, of course, not from the books, because it's never been put there. The lion is silenced, like everyone else in America who is not Caucasian. Now, lions don't go out looking for humans to eat. The humans have to be in the lion's space in order for the lion to defend himself. And then the very first thing about the story that'll come is that the lion attacked them and tried to murder them, so they had to kill the lion, and then they'll justify the slaughter of an innocent animal. And in these cases, the slaughter of innocent black folks. Because you know, anytime black folks defend themselves, of course, automatically, they are the problem. There's only one group of people in the history of the United States, in the history of the globe, who managed to destroy everything they come in contact with. Only one. I don't have to say it. We all know. And of course, remember the Holocaust. Remember 9/11, 9/11. Forget slavery. Forget all that stuff because it's over and it didn't happen and that's over with and I didn't have anything to do with it. But don't forget the Holocaust and don't forget 9/11. Forget slavery though. Forget all about the legacy stolen from people of color. Now, America not only owes black people for the free labor for 400 years, well, they also owe for all of the stolen land, the loss of income, the denial of generational wealth, all caused by hatred and lies. And I'm about to tell you about just one of those. I need y'all to understand just how many hidden situations this country has experienced. So today's show is about a place that many black folks have been, and they don't even know they've been there. That's the funny part. There's a little town in Georgia. It's called Oscarville. Most people have never heard of it. Oscarville is a suburb of Atlanta and is right outside the city limits because it's in a county by the name of Forsyth. And Forsyth is the whitest county in Georgia and has been for almost the last 100 years. But the thing about Oscarville, Georgia, is that it actually sits beneath Lake Lanier. There's a lake in Georgia, a very big lake, that I myself have been to many times. But I can promise you this. If I had known then what I know now, I would never, ever have gone there. In just a few days, there's going to be families and people that are going to go to the lake. They're going to pull out their boats and their jet skis and they're going to fish and they're going to barbecue and they're going to kick it on the lake. Kick it on what I believe is a haunted lake to celebrate the founding of America, the 4th of July, which, by the way, let's not forget that people of color were in chains during that fateful day when America was founded and in its celebration. And that brings me to my next, hey, don't forget, y'all, Juneteenth is coming. That's our emancipation, Juneteenth. Don't forget that holiday. Although that's a Texas thing, it needs to be national and it needs to be clear. So Lake Lanier was built in the 1950s. Now, it was said that it was built for the provision of drinking water and hydroelectric use. Recreation was a secondary idea, or so they say. So they say. Now, Lake Lanier is filled with water, but it's also filled with tragedy and death and other things. Now, this all started in 1912. Now, people always, when I do these histories, it's funny how no matter what direction I go in, it always manages to begin in a time where we think that we should forget about or it's not relevant. In fact, the relevance is quite clear, and I'm going to break it down for you in today's show as well. Now, 1912, Forsyth County, Georgia. A white mob did what they do. They did what they always have done. They accused, and this is so cliche because it's so typical, and it's the same story every single time. Every massacre in America, not everyone, but so many of them, revolve around this same lie. Another black man raped a white woman. So they say. The raping and beating of another white woman had happened only 2 weeks earlier. Now, the first one, they picked the first black guy they saw and they hung him, lynched him. In fact, he was in police custody when they got him. Why? Because the police were the KKK. Many are still the KKK. The second lady, who was left bloodied and unconscious in the woods, they picked up 2 teenagers. And after a very fast trial, they hung both of them. The first guy they hung in the county square. If you go to, there's a place in Forsyth County called Cumming, Georgia. And I've been there. In fact, I've had friends that live there, black folks, now, finally, because that place was all white all the way into the late 80s. And when I say all white, I mean lily white. Of course, there's never been any proof put forward of any of these men having done any of what they said they did. These are always the justifications. Now, the reason I'm saying this, lately, Tulsa, Oklahoma has gotten an awful lot of attention. Black Wall Street, which was burned for the same damn reason almost. Because a black man bumped into a white woman in an elevator by accident because the elevator wasn't stable. And of course, by the time the story got out, he had raped her and did a bunch of other stuff. And so they went and burned down, murdered, and destroyed an entire black community. 35 blocks of Tulsa, Oklahoma. This is yet another one of those scenarios. And in fact, Tulsa was 1921. This was also in 1921. A lot of the massacres that took place in America happened between 1919. Well, it was really between the early 1900s, period. But between 1919 and 1921, this was a hot time. And in fact, they called one of those periods the hot summer. And a red summer, I'm sorry, where a lot of massacres took place and a lot of people were murdered, a lot of black folks. But not just murdered. They were run out and they left everything they had. Now, there was no proof that these men did anything, which reminds me of the very same individuals who we have today who think that magically recounting votes will somehow prove that Donald Trump won an election. They are going to make it be true, regardless of whether it is or it isn't. White lives matter. You didn't hear me. White lives matter. There's no proof, only hatred of black people and the stripping away of the power structure that has kept one group of people with the ability to destroy and disrupt anything they don't like. Unchecked, by the way. No trial, no investigation, nothing. This incident, just like all the rest, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, Florida, Springfield, Illinois. And by the way, in case you didn't know, Springfield, Illinois, that situation, that massacre, is what spawned the birth of the NAACP. Look that up. Elaine, Arkansas. That list goes on. Ocoa, Florida. Another very bad massacre. All of which have been kept from history. All of which have been covered up. Now, my thing is this. If white folks are so proud of being racist, why cover it up? Why not include it in the history? Why not let the world know about the abomination, the destruction, and the hatred that they hold in their hearts so fondly? I just wonder about that. And then, of course, we had the Emmett Till situation, Scottsboro boys, Purvis Payne, and then Purvis Payne is all the way up into the 2000s. These are people who've been accused of crimes that they didn't commit. Why? Because white lives matter. How have been prosecuted and put into incarcerated into the system who are innocent? Because white lives matter. all rooted in accusations of white women. For some reason, white men use white women to justify killing black people. Isn't that amazing? Being black in a world where white lives matter. Now, here's the amazing part. They would rather have white rapists and killers, who most of the time were the actual perpetrators, walking amongst them, acting like nothing happened, and never seek justice, rather than live with black people in peace who don't care what they do one way or the other. They would rather kill somebody black than to catch the person who actually murdered and raped their white women. That's amazing. But that shows you how deep that hatred runs. Now, according to white social constructs, black men, for some reason, are hypersexual and just salivate at the thought and idea of having a white woman. That was the idea. That was the reason for all of the destruction. That's one hell of a projection, boy. I tell you. In the late 1800s, claims that black men had raped or made sexual advances on white women were frequently cited to justify their lynchings. Historians say that in reality, many rape accusation claims were false and were often used as cover for consensual relationships that were at the time extremely taboo. So in other words, some of them white women wanted them black men, but they knew they get in trouble if they got caught. So they had to go ahead and put it out. Oh, he raped me. Ooh, we've seen that before. Racist beliefs were so deep-seated among white communities that whites could not countenance the idea of a white woman desiring sex with a black person. Thus, any physical relationship between a white woman and a black man had by definition to be an unwanted assault. And that's from the historian Philip Dre. And when I think about all the massacres that have taken place all across this country, they've all been perpetrated by whom else? White folks. There are white folks who talk about they get tired of hearing black people complain about these types of things, yet black people have never. Any of y'all, now correct me if I'm wrong, please. Have any of y'all ever heard of a black mob lynching, destroying a town, killing off a bunch of people, burning down their houses and churches in the history of this country? Anybody? I'll wait. Right now, we got a bunch of mass shootings taking place by angry white men. There might be one or two blacks in there, but mostly angry white men shooting up everybody. But guess what? All this is that same massacre attitude, only is taking place and it's happening to those who look just like them. The gloves are off. As Malcolm X once said, the chickens are once again coming home to roost. It's amazing how when black folks point out racism, suddenly black people become the racist. They're according to some white folks, you know. I don't understand why they just don't own their nonsense. Anyway, in Forsyth County, y'all, by 1910, and this is after slavery and after the Reconstruction, in Forsyth County, by 1910, 10% of the county was black. And black people, of course, had made great economic strides. Black families, now get this, owned 200 to 300 acres of land individually. Now think about that. In Forsyth County at that time, there were roughly 1,000 black folks. Now, not everybody had 200 or 300 acres of land, but a large percentage did. 200 to 300 acres each. Several families, of course, were documented landowners. Now, I want y'all to understand this. Forsyth County is one of the richest communities in America today.
The houses in Forsyth County, most of the areas begin at $500,000. The property there is some of the most expensive, not only in Georgia, but across the country. Most of which belonged to black people and was stolen. Whites forced out 1,098 of the black residents of Forsyth County, which was all of them. That's Cumming, Georgia now. The common story was that they had all been run out to protect its white women after these alleged rapes by black men. Right now, today, there are still black cemeteries that all stop. The dates, if you look at the tombstones, the dates stop at about 1910 and 12. So in other words, if you buried your loved one in Forsyth County prior, because of course black people were very prosperous in Forsyth County prior to this massacre, you could not go back and visit their graves. In fact, to date, you can go to Forsyth County and there are communities where there are literally cemeteries, black cemeteries in the backyards of some of these mansions right now today. As a descendant, you'd have to be a distant descendant because no one black went into Forsyth County between 1921 and 1980s. The late 80s, you weren't allowed there. And it was more like and if you did go there, it was more of a sundown town. And for those of you who don't know what a sundown town is, it means if you black, you better not let your black ass get caught there after sundown. It's going to be a problem. I'm really interested in this thought crossed my mind today while I was preparing for the show. I want to know why we don't ever talk to or see or anyone interviews any of the descendants of these white supremacists, of the people who did these things. Where are they? Where are the people who want to stand up for these sorts of atrocities, who think that their ancestors did the right thing? How come we don't ever see any of them? I would really be interested in hearing what they have to say today, especially since they benefited financially and in their legacy, generational wealth. What do they have to say about the fact that a lot of them are still to date living on stolen land? The woman who was raped and murdered in 1912, her name was May Crow. She was 18. And of course, the case is still to date unsolved. The man who was hung for her killing was named Rob Edwards. Just hung him. They hung him almost immediately in the town square. Now, the thing about that hanging was that that the participants were the majority of the county, residents of the county. They say there were roughly 5,000 people who actually came out to witness and participate in the festival-like activities of his lynching. It was a carnival atmosphere. They said that they took his body and drug it around the square while people took their guns and shot at the body, and then they hung it up and they shot it some more, and it was a bullet-riddled body. This was their idea of fun. 5,000 people at one time or another decided to come through, hang out, pardon the pun, and some took shots at the body as a form of recreation. And of course, there's no mention of any arrests, no indictments, no prosecutions from the beginning to the end. No one got in any trouble for murder, arson, destruction of property, theft, or any of that. Because right after they hung him, the angry mobs started burning black churches, black homes, and businesses. and they had the Night Riders. And for those of you who don't know, Stone Mountain, which depicts the individuals who were members of the Confederacy, all of that was Klan territory. It was well-known Klan headquarters, or the origin to some degree of the Klan. So all of these people were, needless to say, part and parcel members of the Klan. They called them vigilantes, but we already know who they were. So from that period forward, they enforced white borders. The borders were, you cannot, if you black, don't come here, period. Now, when they ran the blacks out of Forsyth, a lot of them left the region and they went up north it was part of the Great Migration. You know, people moved up north and into industrial mechanized areas, Michigan and, you know, Chicago and Ohio and places like that. But a lot of them they moved right up north of Forsyth County to another place called Hall County, which was just across the border. Well, found out that Hall County, some members up there also tried to do the same thing that was done in Forsyth County. But fortunately, the sheriff up there wasn't having it. And in fact, did arrest 6 white men, and they were prosecuted and jailed for their activities in attempting to run black people out of Hall County. The sheriff up there wasn't going. So that is one good footnote for that region, if that's even possible. But now, here's the thing. From the 1860s all the way through the 1920s, Forsyth County wasn't the only place this happened. All of those other places that I named earlier all suffered from a lot of the same thing. In fact, the Springfield Massacre was so popular that other places would say, don't make us Springfield you. In other words, don't make us do to you what they did to blacks in Springfield. My point about all of this, again, is why is all of this stuff hidden? Why don't we know these things? Why was this not included in our history lesson? I want to know. Ever since that time, a lot of these communities have remained white throughout this time. So, today, fortunately, Forsyth County is now about 3.6% black. And yes, black people have moved back into that area. And in fact, because there are whites up there who don't like it as well. In 1987, a civil rights march was held where the residents, they threw rocks and racial slurs at the marchers, which prompted an inquiry. And this is where the can of worms gets open. What they wanted, what it brought up was people wanted to know, would it be possible for the land, money, and other losses be returned to the descendants of those who were run out of Forsyth County? Reparations, y'all. That's what that is. The land was illegally obtained, and they wanted to know, could it be turned back over to the descendants? Well, they decided that since the land had been bought and sold and handed down several times since then, see, after 100 years, y'all ever wonder if you ever pay attention to, like, say, for example, the Kennedy assassination and things like that? They seal these records and they keep things really quiet for 100 years. What they want to do is wait until everybody that was involved is dead before they talk about it. So that way you don't have anywhere to exact your revenge. That's one of America's historical facts. This is something that has happened multiple times and continues to happen. Because the property had been handed down and sold several times since then, they decided that they would not be able to return those lands or would they probably do it in the future? And I call BS, because at the end of the day, it's still land. It's still attachable. It still belonged to somebody else. And I personally don't give a damn who sold it to who or who did what with it in the meantime. I think these people should receive that land, not only that land, but the loss of income that went with that land for the last 100 years. And anybody who bought, sold, or did anything else with it in the meantime, that's like buying a stolen car. If I steal your car and I drive it for 6 months and sell it to somebody else, if the police catch that person in the car, they're going to come back and get me for selling it to them. The person who bought the car is just at a loss, and the person who owned the car is going to actually get the car back, unless the insurance paid it off and then the insurance owns the car. Why would a car be more valuable than land? These people should get repaired for their loss. Their ancestors should be repaired for their loss. That's a loss of legacy. That's a loss of generational wealth. That land today is worth over $10 million. Go after the descendants. Charge them as criminals. You know? But this is typical behavior. This is blame the victim, as usual. Anytime black folks try to defend themselves or stand up for what's right, of course they get blamed, which is what has happened at many of these massacres. And if you do your history homework and you look back, if you read any of the stories, listen to any of the videos, you will see that every time black folks attempted to defend themselves from the encroachment of white hate, they were usually charged and blamed for their own demise. Victim blaming. By that same thinking, if a woman wears a certain type of skirt, she deserves to be raped. And we know that that's not true. But this is the type of thinking that they've gotten away with for centuries. Some of this land is some of the most valuable in the Atlanta and Georgia area, in the Atlanta suburbs. And believe it or not, and did you know that this land also was stolen twice? First, it was stolen from the Cherokee, then it was stolen from black people. So actually, black folks shouldn't even get it. The indigenous of the area should get the land back. But we know that's not going to happen either. And that's probably the precedent used to not give it back to black folks, because they figure, hell, if we got to give it back to them, then we got to give it back to the indigenous people of the region, the Cherokee Nation. And we know they're not going to do that. There's a family there named Bagley, and apparently the Bagley property is the most valuable. Again, stolen. All them white folks got their mansions built on these black folks' property that they just ran them off from and sold it off in parcels and lots. Well, Oscarville, Georgia is now a backwoods Atlantis. 100 feet below the surface of Lake Lanier. Oscarville, the portion of Oscarville, parts of where black folks had their farms, was flooded to make Lake Lanier. It took 5 years to fill the lake. It was built in 1957. There's still things down there. There's still homes, bridges, and trees, very tall trees, and bodies. There are bodies below Lake Lanier as well. There's still graves below Lake Lanier. They claim they moved them all, but they didn't. The thing about it is that Lake Lanier is notorious for death today. I'm going to give you the numbers here in a minute. Let's see, 39,000 acres is what makes this one of the largest bodies of water in the Southeast United States. There are corpses that have never been recovered. And these are people who out there having boating accidents and swimming accidents. They've never found them. And they can't find them because they're trees. There are 60-foot trees down there that they've cut the tops off of. And that's why a lot of boating accidents happen, because people have to be careful about how they recreate. because there's stuff under there that'll tear the bottom of your boat up. And there's a lot of sunken boats in Lake Lanier as well. There are people who people don't even know is missing, amazingly enough. The tragedy most famous, Jeffrey Simon Hubbard, who was found guilty of homicide by vessel, among other charges, in a jet ski collision that seriously injured a 15-year-old girl and led to the death of Usher. Y'all know Usher Raymond, the famous singer, 11-year-old stepson in 2012. His name was Ryan Glover. And the child was the son of Usher's ex-wife, Tamika Foster Raymond. Now, in summary, y'all, after this ethnic cleansing of Forsyth County, oh, and by the way, right quick, let me show y'all this. This right here, that is Sidney Lanier. That's the guy they named the lake after, and he is a Confederate soldier and poet. Ugh. It's like we talk about cancel culture and getting rid of monuments and statues. We have to rename the lake. But who knows? Anyway, after the ethnic cleansing was complete, to the satisfaction of white locals, Lake Lanier, a man-made lake, was created. Lake Lanier was forced upon the land of those affluent, self-sufficient blacks. The Buford Dam was also created and flooded in order to cover up the hidden horror of the county's past. There seemed to be very little punishment for racial injustice, egregious to some but appalling to most, in Forsyth County. News sources made mention that Lake Lanier was flooded to ensure that Georgia was always replenished with a strong water source and to support hydroelectric power for the city of Atlanta. And even in 1956, people continued to lie about the facts of this creative cover-up. The restless souls roam beneath the surface of a very popular landmark. I can't help but wonder if their souls will ever truly rest. As unbelievable as this event may seem, there are still graves below that once established town. With whispers of ghosts and curses, Georgians find Lake Lanier's position above several old towns to blame for many visitors' deaths. Since 1994, nearly 200 people have died at Lake Lanier. Some say the curse of Oscarville will never be lifted until the deaths that are buried beneath that lake can be vindicated. Far too many times, we've seen the story play out like a bad movie, ending with an even more grimacing sequel. I want to tell y'all, too, there's a guy who actually wrote a book that is very intriguing, and it talks about this entire ordeal. And it's called Blood at the Root, a racial cleansing in America. And his name is Patrick Phillips. I suggest that you check that book out. Y'all, this is the thing. We all know that all of this is the elephant in the room. I, of course, have grown very tired of all the lies, all of the confusion, all of the misinformation, all of the willingness to pretend like these things never happen. There are far too many of these massacres that have taken place across America. It was so hard for me to put this information together today because no matter where I looked, I ended up down so many other rabbit holes. And what do I mean? When I started looking at the Ocoee, Florida massacre, and this was a man, July, I can't think of his last name, who was registering people to vote, who was murdered, who owned thousands of acres of land, who provided for the community, who created a community, who owned citrus farms. He literally had orchards. When they killed him and destroyed what all he and his family had worked for, They divided his land up and even wrote into the bylaw that it could never be sold to anyone black again. This is America. This is the place where legacy means nothing if you're black. Generational wealth has been stripped from our people on so many levels. The idea that you have individuals who still walk around today saying things like black people, telling black people to get a job and do this and do that. Oh, you get an equal shot like everybody else. I challenge any of them to have an idea of what it would have been like had someone stripped their ancestors of everything and sent them on their way, or even killed them. They wouldn't even be here. Do you know how many brilliant minds we will not ever experience because they were snuffed out at the whim of white hate? We sit here today still struggling with inequality and justice, inequality in economics, and so many others. And we continue to participate in this, what has been referred to as great experiment. See, the truth is, America was made great a long time ago by free labor, by the sweat and the blood and the tears of black bodies, without which America would never have become what it has today, what it was when it was actually a decent place, when people had integrity. It is amazing to me that there are those who still refuse to acknowledge their wrongdoing. And anyone who claims they had nothing to do with it, I challenge them to denounce their history, their ancestry, their wealth, based on the fact that their family was allowed to keep everything they had and build upon it and not have it stripped out from under them. Can you imagine in Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example, or Oscarville, Georgia, or Ocoee, Florida, or Springfield, Illinois, and I can just go down a list. Can you imagine what it would have been like if those people had been allowed to flourish? Which ones of them are the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos of their time? Imagine if black folks woke up tomorrow and decided, well, Jeff Bezos, we taking everything you got. Get on down the road. Bill Gates, you're done. Get out of here. That's what was done to black folks in America. And then we get hit with, y'all are lazy. Y'all are criminals. You're animals. You do this, you do that. And then you wonder why black folks have PTSD, why black folks are angry, why black folks are tired. How about some reparations? How about putting back what you took? How about being held responsible for your crimes? Any white person who tells you that they have white friends or they are your friend and they remain silent in the face of oppression, destruction, they are not your friends. They are no one to you. Silence is a killer. And it has gotten many, many black folks killed. Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Brian Forbes, and this has been The Black Factor. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out and hanging.
Oh, I'm sorry, y'all. I had my mic down. Um, this was a this particular rebroadcast was one of my favorite because what my intention here was to quell any idea put forward, particularly by the Army Corps of Engineers or anyone else, to suggest that this is an urban myth, speculation, or rumor. I provided the facts, provided names. There's a lot more even to this story. In fact, there was a lady whose family, a story that I saw, whose family are direct recipients of land and things, assets taken by her ancestors during this time. And when asked about it, they all, of course, get very defensive. The mother of one of the young ladies who was murdered, oh, I'm sorry, not the mother, the grandmother or grand aunt or something like that, or her, one of her descendants, let me put it that way, grand something. Anyway, they still harbor the idea that someone black could have possibly been the perpetrator of these crimes. And this is a typical story. There's no variation from it. It's sort of like how right now today someone white will utter the word nigger in the most vile of hatred. The antiquated ideology and terminology is supposed to somehow trigger anger in black people. The idea that those old euphemisms and attempts at control are somehow still the belief system that they are superior is asinine at best. In fact, I find it laughable at this point in history. We are living in a time where things have evolved and they have changed. I do believe in America that there is going to come a time where someone is going to have to pay for these atrocities. They want us to forget. They want people to walk around and say, oh, that happened a long time ago. Oh, that has nothing to do with me, while in fact benefiting from the proceeds of their ancestors' debauchery. They will say, you should forget about that. But they will remind you not to forget the Holocaust. Remember, never forget. They will remind you not to forget 9/11. They'll remind you about the things that disturbed them the most. Yet, they will ask for you to forget the atrocities that you were faced with, your ancestors were faced with, and the reason why generational wealth, or the opportunity of said wealth, has been removed from our ancestors. And therefore, we must find it all within ourselves to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps while they continue to inherit the spoils of death and destruction at the cost, at the expense of our ancestors. The Florida governor in recent months has said that he didn't want young white children to feel as though they had done anything wrong or made them feel uncomfortable about the things that their ancestors had done. Yet, our children are supposed to be comfortable with the atrocities levied against their ancestors and feel very comfortable. This is the double standard. This is America. So, there you have it. Y'all know I could go on about that all day. Somewhere on my YouTube page, you should look up the story of Ocoee, Florida. I mentioned that in this rebroadcast. Ocoee, Florida, there was a man there by the name of Julius July. Doggone it. I can't think of his last name. I had it on the tip of my tongue. I always managed to forget his name. Perry, Julius July Perry, who was a landowner. He and two of his good friends had moved there from the Carolinas and became very prosperous in that town. And they along with other blacks were, of course, run out of that town for the reason of registering other black people to vote. They destroyed their property, took their property, and even wrote into the bylaws that no one black could ever purchase that land again. This is America. And at some point, these things have to be answered for. I'm not going to go any further. Ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate you tuning in tonight and hanging out with me. All my Georgia folks, y'all just keep in mind, Lake Lanier, ooh, I have no desire to go there ever again. Had I known what I knew when I was going there, I would not have. But again, this is America. I want you all to have yourselves a wonderful night and have a better weekend. I love you all. Thank you for tuning. And tell someone, y'all tune in and tell a friend so we can get this thing off, get this thing rolling real, real good, y'all. I'm here to provide information, knowledge, and show you how the past is directly connected to your present. And if we're not very, very careful, into our future. So I want everyone to have a good night. I thank you. Peace, y'all.